Yeah. Anyway, here's story time. Jill and I had one extravagance in our retirement and living in Exmouth, and that was virtually every day when we weren't going out or away, we would walk down to the town from when we lived in Mudbank Lane to when we lived here up the hill. And our one extravagance was going to have a cup of coffee. And we used to rotate this amongst all the coffee shops. And we'd have a cup of coffee and share a piece of cake or something like that. And we used to call that our one extravagance. Now, since Jill died, and particularly since lockdown, I haven't really done that. Uh, because I sort of go down to the town and I think, oh, it's coffee time. And I think, well, I've got a cake that I haven't eaten up just up the hill. I've got the coffee up the hill and I've got nobody to go and chat to. So I'll go home for coffee. So it's tended to drop off the program. I do go sometimes. So anyway, it's quite rare. Anyway, I suppose it was only about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Um, it wasn't a particularly nice day. It was quite windy. And I have to go for a walk. So I thought I will go down to the seafront. And I was walking down, looking down on the seafront from up above the Madeira Walk. And I thought I could go to the, what do they call it? The tea hut, the cricket ground.
All right, yeah.
Down, and that's largely outdoors. So I'm a bit miserable. I'll go down and have a look at the water because very often I avoid the pond because it's crowded and it's nice and quiet. There's just one row back in Madeira Walk. So I walked down and I thought, well, I won't go to hang time because that's out in the open. And John's recommended the coffee at Michael Gayne's and at Mickey's. And I didn't quite know where it was. I had a feeling it was upstairs with a balcony. But there's a coffee shop right down on the bottom of the town on the western end. So I went in there, and it's a sort of long, thin, not a very attractive place. Row of benches, row of small tables and seats down one side. So I went and thought, well, I'll have a cup of coffee. Steer clear of the cakes because I've been warned about those, and sat down. There weren't very many people in there. And then a fair number of people came in, so we moved around, and I ended up sitting next to another man who was obviously on his own. I suppose he was about sort of 55 years old. Looked sort of nautical. He had a sort of sailing jacket on, and he was looking out at the waves breaking over the sandbar, and so was I. And we sort of moved up together to make room for other people and started talking. And I said, a bit breezy. And he said, yes. He said, I'm annoyed. I've got a small day boat, which I trail down from where I live in the Midlands. And I've got friends who live at Limpston. So he said, I park it and launch it at Limpston and go sailing on my own. And he said, weather forecast is pretty awful at the moment. So I've sort of come down here for a walk instead. So there we are. Two coincidences. A, I wasn't deliberately going out for coffee. B, I decided at the last minute to go to Mickey's place. So we started talking about sailing. I said, well, I used to sail a lot. I said, it's difficult sailing here, isn't it, with the tides? And he said, yes, not everybody's cup of tea. And we started, obviously, conversation about sailing. And where, I mean, basically, he was a sort of, not a cruise, yes, he used to go on cruises, cruising sailing boats, and he had this little day boat, whereas I only ever sailed dinghies. So in the course of conversation, I said the various places we lived and sailed, and I said, of course, we started sailing at Littlehampton in Sussex. Oh, he said, I know Littlehampton, so fine. And we were both talking about Littlehampton, which I don't know if any of you have ever been there. It's the end of the River Arun, which wanders up through the South Downs and comes down through Arundel to Littlehampton. And it's got a very, very narrow exit to the sea, through which the tide goes, I think, even faster than the Exe when it's going like mad. Quite a difficult one. And it's also a commercial port still, which is quite amazing. They got used to be a swing bridge. There's a harbour master, a quay, and they used to unload timber and building materials there. And as far as I know, they still do. Now, I have rather lost touch with Littlehampton because my parents moved away ages ago and what have you. So I'm not exact. I don't suppose I've been there for the last 8 or 10 years, perhaps. But it's got developed and it's quite posh. But there's still the river frontage, the sailing club to which Jill and I used to belong. And it's quite a nice place. So anyway, we were talking about it. And he said, it's very odd. He said, we're very closely linked to Littlehampton. We lived there for some time. And he said, my wife worked for the West Sussex County Council. And she worked in an office by the harbour, in fact, the harbour master's office. And for some reason, he said, they sacked the harbour master and made her the harbour master. So she's the only woman harbour master, I think, in the country. He said she was totally unqualified. She just ran the office, which happened to have the harbour master in it. She was obviously very efficient, and they couldn't find anybody with any marine knowledge at all, so they made her the harbour master. And I think she's been was harbour master for quite a long time. I said, that must have been difficult. I was thinking, this is a story that sort of rings a bell with me. Anyway, he said she was very lucky because there were some very, very helpful people. And in particular, there was a retired master mariner who had moved to Littlehampton, who helped out and was able, because they'd only got a trainee pilot, and of course they had to pilot the commercial shipping in and out of this rather difficult entry. He was all right to do it if he was supervised by an appropriate, authorised, appropriate qualified person. And this retired mariner was fully qualified and helped her out. He said without him, she wouldn't have been able to do the job. And as it was, she picked it up, and in the end, they got a fully qualified person pilot in. I said, oh, what was this chap's name? And he said, Jim Petty was my brother.
Wow.
My brother, 15 years younger than me, because I was born well before the war and he was born after the war, 15 years apart. So we had no other brothers or sisters. So we really weren't close. I mean, I was away at boarding school and college. By the time I came and lived at home for a few years while I went to work, he was going through school. I think he was 12 years old when we got married and left home finally. He didn't quite know what to do, but we had an uncle who was a very senior bloke in management at Shell up in London, and got him an apprenticeship. And he went to the College at Southampton, School of Navigation, developed a great interest in mathematics, went on, got qualified, and ended up driving super tankers, gas tankers all over the world. I got married, lived in Dubai for many years, where he worked as a berthing master, which was very responsible because that meant loading and unloading and bringing in tankers and getting rid of them. Ended up at living up at Burnham, working as a berthing master at Bristol, and finally went back to where we came from, Littlehampton. So that's the story. And he had told me the story a few years back about how he helped the RNLI because there was a lifeboat station next to the harbour master's office, and he was telling me all about the Lady Harbour Master.
That's why it rang sort of bells for you when you were hearing bits of it.
When you first started,
yeah. How amazing!
That's amazing.
I phoned him and I said, I've just had a long, amusing morning with your Lady Harbour Master's husband.
Yeah.
End of story. That's all.
But that's an amazing coincidence.
Yeah.
Like the other story, the chances of that happening are odds, Ian.
Yes.
About 10 million to 1. I don't know. It's just quite.
I mean, it just happens all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it does. But although I know people who would say, "Oh, there's more to this. There's something about you, John, that attracts this kind of thing." Whoa.
I'm quite happy if the circumstances arrive to chat to a stranger. And I think that helps. And I mean, he sort of looked friendly.
But you see, I mean,
he obviously was interested in the water and sailing, and you just sort of, you know.
But the whole thing about coincidence, I know we talked about it after your last talk, is it's astonishing because you could each decision point wouldn't have resulted in that.
Quarter of an hour earlier, quarter of an hour later.
How is it that you decided to go for a walk there, go for a walk at that time, him to do the same, because neither of you do this routinely,
yes,
and then come together? It is astonishing. So it would have been so easy to make a separate decision and that event not to have happened at all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, John, other John's just used the word decision a few times. There's a U3A short story writing competition at the moment, and the title is Decision or Decisions. You ought to write your story up and enter it.
You ought to, John. Yeah.
Well, I think the best one, which actually I have written up, is The Weird Day Out. About Jill's the lens cap off her binoculars. I mean that you know.
Yeah.
Title Decision or Decisions, it's ideal.
Yes. I hadn't realised that.
We can give you a transcript of what you said, possibly. I don't know if we can, actually. that's one option with Zoom, but you could remember it even more effectively. I think that's a really good idea, Margaret. It's we wouldn't mind a win from Exmouth and District U3A, John. So if you like to...
where would I find out about it? On the main...
If you Google U3A short story competition, I think you'll find it.
Okay, I'll have a look.
That would be very good, yeah.
Because it looked like you just told that story with no notes, purely from memory.
Oh, absolutely no notes.
in your usual compelling way. You're a born storyteller, John.